Martha had always believed that love was the simplest truth in life. At 72, she had seen hardships, loss, and the slow passage of time, but her heart remained tender and full of hope. Living in a quiet Tennessee town, she had spent the past several months eagerly preparing for this trip, a visit to see her son, Daniel, and his wife, Claire, in the bustling city where they had built their lives. She packed carefully, folding each garment with the precision only years of experience could bring, tucking a few of her favorite homemade cookies into the corners of her suitcase. The thought of seeing Daniel again brought tears of anticipation to her eyes. She remembered when he was a boy, how he used to run into her arms after school, full of stories and laughter. Even as he had grown, moved across states, and built a life of his own, he had promised that family would always come first. And she believed him. Claire, on the other hand, had always been a mystery to Martha. When Daniel had first introduced his wife, she had been polite and kind, smiling politely at Martha's small town ways. But there was something in Claire's eyes, a flicker of impatience, perhaps, or concealed irritation that Martha had brushed off. Love, Martha reasoned, could soften even the hardest edges. The drive to the airport was filled with a nervous excitement. Martha hummed old hymns quietly to herself, occasionally glancing out the window at the rolling hills of Tennessee, painted gold by the late afternoon sun. She imagined Daniel rushing into her arms, Claire smiling warmly, and the three of them sharing a long, laughter-filled dinner. Her mind wandered to the small apartment she would stay in, the neighborhood she would explore, and the city sights she had only ever seen in photographs. At the airport, the hum of travelers, the rolling luggage, and the constant announcements felt like the heartbeat of possibility. Martha's hands trembled slightly as she handed her ticket to the attendant, not from fear, but from pure, unfiltered anticipation. She imagined Daniel already waiting, his arms wide, a grin spreading across his face. She pictured Claire greeting her warmly, apologizing if any small discomfort had been caused by her travel. In her heart, Martha felt a bubble of happiness that no hardship could deflate. But beneath her excitement, there was a whisper of unease she didn't quite acknowledge. The fleeting coldness in Claire's smile, the hurried tone of Daniel's voice when they last spoke on the phone. It lingered like a shadow she refused to name. Martha told herself it was nothing. After all, her son loved her. They would laugh, they would reminisce, and everything would feel as it had been in her fondest memories. With her suitcase rolling behind her and her heart full of hope, she walked toward the arrivals area, unaware that the moment she had been dreaming of for months was about to shatter her world forever. Martha's heart leapt as she scanned the crowded arrivals hall. She spotted Daniel immediately, tall and familiar, weaving through the throngs of people with the effortless ease of a man who belonged to the city. Her legs quickened, and she felt that familiar surge of joy, imagining the warm hug she would finally receive. Behind him, she saw Claire smiling, but not the kind of smile Martha remembered from family gatherings, the smile that hinted at hidden amusement rather than genuine welcome. Martha's pulse quickened anyway. She wanted to believe, to trust. "Mom, you made it," Daniel called, waving as he approached. But as he drew closer, something in his demeanor felt off. His eyes avoided hers for a moment too long, and his voice lacked its usual warmth. Claire, standing beside him, crossed her arms and shifted her weight impatiently. Martha stepped forward eagerly, her suitcase clattering behind her. "Daniel, oh, it's so good to see you," she said, arms outstretched. She imagined the embrace, the laughter, the tears of reunion. But instead of the hug she had imagined, Daniel glanced around nervously and muttered, "Mom, I'm about the car. Claire, can you get her bags?" Claire's eyes flicked to Martha with a thinly veiled smirk. Confused, Martha followed Claire, who didn't help with her luggage but instead gestured vaguely toward the curb. "Your mom should probably wait here for a taxi," Claire said casually, as if Martha were an inconvenient detail in the day. Martha froze. "Wait, what?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel, don't you have the... Daniel stepped back, avoiding her gaze. Mom, we can't really manage this trip the way we thought. Maybe a taxi would be easiest. It hit her then, a wave of disbelief and horror. She had no money for a taxi, no plan for where she would go, no phone charger or hotel booked. She had trusted them completely, and in that moment, the world tilted beneath her feet. The people around them moved in a blur, voices, rolling suitcases, the squeak of airport trolleys. All of it became distant noise compared to the scream rising in her chest. Daniel, why would you leave me here? Her voice cracked, trembling on the edge of despair. He looked away, and Claire's smirk deepened. It's complicated, Mom, Daniel mumbled, avoiding responsibility. We can't do this right now. Martha felt the icy hands of betrayal wrap around her heart. The son she had raised, the boy she had wiped tears from and cheered on at every school recital, the man who had promised to love and care for his family, had abandoned her. She sank to the cold tile floor, tears streaming down her cheeks, suitcase abandoned beside her. The bustling airport moved around her, oblivious to her pain. People brushed past, checking watches, laughing, hurrying to flights, while she felt invisible, utterly alone. Martha had never known such helplessness. The love she had given freely, the trust she had placed in her own child, had been repaid with abandonment. And in that moment of despair, as she sat trembling on the cold airport floor, a fire began to kindle within her, a slow, simmering flame of determination. They had left her here to break her spirit, but Martha realized with shocking clarity that heartbreak could be transformed into power. They had underestimated her, and they would pay for it. Martha sat on the cold airport bench long after Daniel and Claire disappeared into the sea of travelers, their laughter and voices fading like ghosts. Her hands shook, her chest heaving with the weight of disbelief, but somewhere beneath the hurt, a tiny ember of resolve glimmered. She could cry, yes, but crying wouldn't get her home, wouldn't reclaim her dignity, and certainly wouldn't make them understand the magnitude of their betrayal. For hours, she stared at the departure and arrivals boards, tracing flights with her eyes, imagining routes, calculating fares in her mind. She had no money, no plan, and no allies, but she did have determination. Martha reminded herself of a simple truth she had learned in her long life. Survival demanded resourcefulness, and she would survive. Her first step was practical. She found a small information desk and politely explained her situation, hiding the trembling desperation in her voice. A kind stranger, moved by her story, helped her contact a temporary shelter for travelers in need. That night, she slept on a thin cot, listening to the murmur of strangers, feeling simultaneously small and unbroken. The next days were grueling. Martha picked up odd jobs, cleaning hotel lobbies, sorting mail, even delivering newspapers. Every dollar she earned went into a small envelope she hid in her purse. She learned to navigate the city, to find quiet corners in bustling streets, and to protect herself with a vigilance she had never needed before. But it wasn't just survival that fueled her. It was the betrayal, the sting of being cast aside by her own flesh and blood. Every time she thought of Daniel's averted gaze or Claire's smirk, a sharp, cold clarity settled in her mind. They had thought they could humiliate her, leave her powerless, and continue their lives as if nothing had happened. They had no idea what she was capable of. Martha began to observe quietly, like a shadow. She learned of Claire's vanity, the way she flaunted wealth and influence. She discovered Daniel's insecurities, how easily his pride could be wounded, and she smiled not out of cruelty, but out of understanding. She realized that revenge did not require recklessness. It required patience, precision, and cunning. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Martha planted the seeds, a well-timed phone call here, a casual observation shared there. She made connections with people who could help her uncover truths, quietly gathering information, waiting for the perfect moment. Every day she became stronger, not just physically but mentally, emotionally, and strategically. The woman who had once trusted blindly was gone. In her place stood someone capable of remarkable resilience. Late at night, when the city was quiet and the hum of distant traffic lulled her into reflection, Martha allowed herself a small smile. They had underestimated her. They thought abandonment would destroy her spirit, but instead it had forged it into something sharper, something unstoppable. The flames of betrayal had become the fuel for her metamorphosis. She was no longer the woman who had arrived at the airport with hope and trembling anticipation. She was a force of quiet strength, biding her time, preparing for the moment when justice would meet deceit. And that moment, she knew, would come. Months passed, and Martha's quiet life in the city had transformed. She had reclaimed her independence, her dignity intact, and her mind sharpened by betrayal. Yet the thought of Daniel and Claire lingered, not with longing, but with a patient fire of justice. She knew she did not need to stoop to cruelty. Cleverness and timing could deliver more satisfaction than anger ever could. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A local charity gala, attended by prominent city residents, happened to include Daniel's business associates and, of course, Claire herself. Martha arrived unannounced, elegant, and composed, her presence commanding attention even before she opened her mouth. The daughter-in-law's eyes widened as she spotted her, a mixture of shock and irritation flashing across her face. Daniel, too, froze, realizing that his mother's survival had not only endured but flourished. Martha smiled gently, the kind of smile that disarms arrogance. She mingled, listened, and subtly planted the seeds of truth. She spoke casually to acquaintances who knew Claire's business dealings, revealing details of her manipulations and schemes. She shared anecdotes that highlighted Daniel's growing dependence on Claire, hinting at the ways he had been misled and influenced. Every word was carefully measured, every revelation cloaked in civility, yet piercing in its clarity. By the end of the evening, the room's atmosphere had shifted. Claire's friends whispered, questioning her integrity. Daniel, pale and uneasy, realized for the first time the depth of his mother's endurance and cleverness. He understood that abandoning her at the airport had consequences far beyond the immediate embarrassment he had imagined. Martha had turned the tables not with anger, but with wisdom, grace, and subtle strategy. After the gala, Martha approached Daniel privately. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. Do you see now, Daniel, love and trust are not obligations to be discarded. They are the foundations of life. You left me alone, expecting me to crumble, but I did not. I survived. I grew, and I am stronger than ever. Daniel's eyes filled with remorse, shame, and awe. He had not imagined the strength it would take to rise from betrayal, nor the sharpness of a mind honed by pain. Claire's attempts to intervene fell flat. Martha's presence, dignity, and intelligence overshadowed them both. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of Martha's actions became clear. Claire's influence over Daniel diminished, their relationship strained, and the truth of her selfishness surfaced among friends and colleagues. Martha did not gloat. Her revenge was not in spectacle, but in the quiet reclaiming of respect, autonomy, and the restoration of justice. Standing alone on the balcony of her temporary city apartment, Martha breathed in the cool night air. The city lights shimmered like tiny promises kept. She thought of the woman she had been, the trusting, hopeful mother abandoned at the airport, and smiled softly. That woman had not been destroyed. She had been reborn, tempered by betrayal, fortified by resilience, and guided by the quiet satisfaction of justice served. Martha had lost nothing that truly mattered. Her spirit, her dignity, and her intelligence remained untouchable. And for the first time since that fateful day at the airport, she felt complete peace. The past had tested her, but she had endured. And in enduring, she had triumphed.